Thank you for coming to practice. It's a joy to be here on our second session of the Four-Arm Measurables. And Jan, we were talking about potential retreat topics for this coming year. And this actually may be a preview of a retreat that Khenpo, Sherab, Sangpo may be offering in Ely, as Kim McCluskey, our practice leader there, emailed me and asked me to ask Khenpo to teach more in depth on the Four Immeasurables, and the second request that he give some teachings on Longchenpa. And I let out a roar of laughter because this was after I had already written my teachings. And Kim and I have been studying together Longchenpa for the past 2 years. I had the pleasure of being present at a practice interview between Kim and Khenpo Sherab Sangpo, in which Kim had suggested to Khenpo, I think I just want to read Longchenpa for a year, just only Longchenpa, and just study him in depth. And Khenpo said, that's a really good idea. So I said to Kim, can I join you? And he said, sure. So he and I have been emailing back and forth this year, actually for the past 2 years since the Guru Yoga retreat, kind of our insights and sharing our knowledge about Longchenpa. So when he sent me that email, I just laughed because I think our minds in relationship to the Dharma must have gotten in some form of sync that is beyond time and space. So we'll see if that happens. Like I said, I'm not sure what Khenpo wants to teach on, but if he does, there might be a longer retreat on the Four Immeasurables or a longer retreat on Longchenpa up in Ely, which I think would be wonderful. Certainly, you would all benefit from Khenpo's teachings on these topics, and I would hope that someday that will come to fruition, even if it doesn't happen this teaching cycle. It also motivated me to find the meditation practice that we're going to be doing today, which is called the Continuous Reign of Benefit of Beings, an abbreviated annotation of all-pervading benefit of beings, the meditation and recitation of the Supreme Noble Avalokiteshvara, which I put into your folders for today. It's a really long title for what is actually a fairly simple, beautiful practice on generating the deity of Avalokiteshvara, who is the Buddha of compassion. It's a beautiful practice that combines the generation of relative bodhicitta with the view of ultimate bodhicitta. And also this, as I said before, this is the form that Avalokiteshvara takes when you want to use the Buddha of compassion to meditate on the Four Immeasurables. So I found that again, and in case some of you were at that original retreat in 2008, you might recognize this book, which is called Trainings in Compassion, Manuals on the Meditation of Avalokiteshvara. And this was translated by Tyler DeWar, and it is a beautiful series of different teachings on Avalokiteshvara, or Chenresik in Tibetan, who is the Buddha of compassion. And so if you enjoy practicing this meditation, which is an abbreviated form of it, longer teachings and more deeper explanations can be found in this book under the teaching of the same title that's on here. So I just wanted to let you know that that is available to you. And then also, I just want to do all of the books at once. I'm going to quote today from Longchenpa's teachings in the book, You Are the Eyes of the World. This is actually Longchenpa's commentary on the Jewel Ship, which is his commentary on the Tantra called the All-Creating Monarch. And this was translated by Kennard Lipman and Merrill Peterson, and it's really a wonderful little book. So if you're interested in reading a shorter book with Longchenpa's teachings, this is a really nice one. One that I find a little bit more difficult just because of the some of the choices of translation words that Herbert Gunther made. I think the translation is wonderful, but some of his choices are just a little bit difficult. It's kindly bent to ease us, part 1 on mind. And still very worthwhile to read, but instead of saying bodhicitta, he has a very long translation in English, which involves the words consummate perspicacity, which I can't even understand in English. So that's what I mean by sometimes challenging. It's not that I don't believe that he was a very learned, wonderful practitioner, but just I always have to translate some of his terminology back into more familiar things. So those are some of the texts that I use to prepare the teachings today. First, we should review briefly what the 4 immeasurables are. Does anyone want to remind us of them from last week? The first one, anyone?
Equanimity.
The first one that we talked about last time was equanimity, because we said equanimity was the gateway into the practice of all the other 4 immeasurables. So yes, equanimity. Another, loving kindness. Joy is the third one, and now we're just missing the second one. Anyone? It's something we talk about all the time in Buddhism, compassion, exactly. And those are, again, just to remind you that love in relationship to the 4 immeasurables is the wish that all people, all living beings, all sentient beings, have happiness in its causes. Compassion is, anyone, what are we wishing when we're wishing people compassion?
Freedom from suffering.
Exactly, freedom from suffering and also its causes. Joy or joyfulness. Anyone, what is that wish?
Happiness and causes.
Yeah, and that people never be parted from happiness, both on the mundane levels, which would be the temporary levels, and also that they are really deeply connected and know their connection with sublime bliss, which is on the ultimate level. And then equanimity is the wish.
Non-attachment.
Exactly, that we actually practice that we have this wish of love, compassion, and joy. Exactly, we practice it with non-attachment. So we practice it in a non-partial way, so that when we practice it, we are generating it for all sentient beings and not just for the people that we like or are attached to, or trying to withhold it from the people that we don't like and have aversion towards. So those are the 4 immeasurables. And again, as we talked about last time, usually when we talk about the 4 immeasurables, we would think about cultivating them on a path that is developing relative bodhicitta, or the intention to have these qualities. But one of the ways that Longchenpa teaches the 4 immeasurables that I find incredibly profound and beautiful is that he's always teaching them in ways that show the union between the ultimate nature of mind, which would be ultimate bodhicitta, and the relative bodhicitta, which would be the way that the mind expresses itself as love, compassion, and joy. So as he says, and I'm just going to quote from the All-Creating Monarch, his definitions are so clear. Relative bodhicitta means to place yourself unselfishly, compassionately, at the disposal of others in a heartfelt desire to remove the real causes of unhappiness. Ultimate bodhicitta is the direct understanding of openness, understanding that nothing possesses an unvarying or exhaustively specifiable mode of being. Such understanding definitely ends unhappiness and leads to enlightenment. So what is this understanding that definitely ends unhappiness? And what is he referring to when he talks to that nothing possesses an unvarying or exhaustively specifiable mode of being? So I want to talk about that for a little bit. This understanding that definitely ends happiness is the wisdom that recognizes emptiness. And wisdom that recognizes emptiness naturally expresses itself as compassion. So this is the heart of our practice because this is the union of the relative bodhicitta with the ultimate bodhicitta. So there are many, many synonyms in Buddhism for this union of emptiness and compassion. And oftentimes, I think sometimes the terminology of Buddhism, which is so vast and profound, can confuse us when really they're pointing to the same ideas or the same concepts. So we're going to talk a little bit about the union of relative bodhicitta and the union of ultimate bodhicitta. And what do you know this as? Oftentimes, the union of ultimate bodhicitta is expressed as wisdom or the knowledge of emptiness, and compassion is then expressed as skillful means and methods. So this is the absolute aspect and the relative aspect. Another way of talking about the ultimate is the mode of being and how it manifests. So the mode of being emptiness, and how it manifests as compassion. The mode of being wisdom, the nature of mind, and how it manifests as being compassion. And another way that we talk about it is the mode of being as the Dharmakaya, which is the truth of emptiness, the nature of emptiness, and the Rupakaya, its expression as the two form bodies, which is the Sambhogakaya, which is expressed as light rays or as sound, and also the Nirmanakaya, which is expressed as the body of a Buddha, like Buddha Shakyamuni is a Nirmanakaya, or as the form body. So these are all different synonyms for actually talking about the same thing. And fundamentally they come down to wisdom that recognizes emptiness and the expression of that wisdom as compassion. They're also referring to the nature of mind, its empty nature, and its expression as compassion. So as I mentioned in my first teaching on the Four Immeasurables, Longchenpa, as you mentioned, Heather, counsels us to cultivate equanimity first, as equanimity allows one to express love, compassion, and joy in an unbiased and non-partial way. So this is the relative bodhicitta in action. This is the relative bodhicitta as is become expressed. But this is informed by the view of the ultimate bodhicitta, which is the nature of our mind. So Longchenpa points out, and we talked about this last week, that our mind's nature is non-dual. There is no self versus other in the nature of mind. There's no inherent self versus other. So any concepts that we have of self versus other are concepts that are things that are placed upon or covering up the actual nature of mind. And that's actually a big relief, because it means that we can actually give up what Lee was referring to before, this concept of attachment of some selves or some objects as being ones that we really prefer, and other people or other objects as being things that we want to push away. And this, as we talked about last time, is one of the fundamental reasons that we suffer, is because we have so many preferences and so many ideas about things where we are accepting or rejecting. Another way of talking about this is being caught up in a cycle of hope for having more of what you want and fear of not having fear of having what you don't want. So these are different ways of talking about the cycle of samsara. And what Longchenpa is pointing out to us is that this suffering is not inherent in the nature of our mind. It is not intrinsic to the nature of our mind. So in other ways, when we recognize this, and in the language of Buddhism, do some purification processes, or in another way of talking about let go of this, then we are able to make a connection with the nature of our mind, whose nature is the union of emptiness and compassion, and also bliss. So recognizing this, Longchenpa points out that our practice of relative bodhicitta on the level of the four immeasurables, so practicing loving kindness, practicing compassion, and practicing joy towards all sentient beings, is actually a reflection of our mind's nature. So our practice reflects what is the actual nature of our mind. And so we're not making anything up when we're doing this. We're not adding anything to our nature. This is it. And that's why we can learn how to express it. And this is actually quite a profound thing that Buddha Shakyamuni is pointing out to us in his teachings on the Four Noble Truths. He says, yes, there is suffering, and there's a cause of suffering. There's also cessation of suffering, and there's causes that lead to the cessation of suffering. So as we practice this relative bodhicitta, the four immeasurables, what we're doing are practicing the causes of cessation of suffering. But the ultimate cause of the cessation of suffering is really recognizing the nature of our mind. And so that's why I find Longchenpa's teachings on the four immeasurables to be so profound. So unconditional compassion arises naturally when the duality of self versus other is transcended and our perception is purified. Now, what does transcendence mean? In this case, it means having wisdom, understanding the nature of mind. So it doesn't mean going anywhere. It just means actually connecting with what's already present, with that wisdom that's already present. Holding on to the duality between self and other prevents the free and spontaneous expression of love and compassion, and holds these inherent qualities in a potential state so that they can't be expressed. So that's why when we empty ourselves of the concept of possessing a fundamental self or ego, our wisdom mind, which is innate to us, can recognize its nature, which is this union of emptiness and compassion. And this actually is joy, which is the joy and the sublime bliss of the third immeasurable. So all of these are just so closely connected. Remember that emptiness in Buddhism does not mean nothingness. This is really important, as in nihilism. And also, it is not an object, so emptiness is not an object or a fixed state, as in an absolute state. Buddhism avoids these two extremes of both nihilism and eternalism, or no meaning, lack of meaning, and absolute meaning. So empty of inherent existence indicates actually a great potential. And what is this great potential? Longchenpa describes it as an endless play of blissful energy. And this is actually quite wonderful. So when we avoid the extremes of nihilism and avoid the extreme of absolutism, what is this lack of a fixed state? What arises, or what we can recognize as wisdom, is the play of wisdom, or the play of bliss, or the play of compassion, or the expression of it, which is wonderful. He also calls this the creativity of the universe, which he says is the epitome of the teachings of the Buddha. So these are all synonyms now for the play of this blissful energy. So the union of bliss, emptiness, the union of compassion, emptiness, pure and total presence, the creativity of the universe is dharmata, or what's called the suchness of reality. So unconditioned love, compassion, joy, and equanimity are dharmata, or are the suchness of reality. And I always like to think of this as Shakyamuni Buddha's incredibly good news, which, if we focus only on suffering and never look at the fact that suffering has a cause and that it can also have a cessation, we never get to the bliss. So today, I like bliss. I hope you do too. So I want to point this out and remind us of this, because we can forget it a lot. We can forget it really easily because our daily lives can be really tough some days. So this bliss emptiness is the suchness. It's the nature of reality. And how can this be? Well, if you remember that when we chanted the Heart Sutra, we chanted things such as form is emptiness and emptiness is form. So, and we also talked about form as the union of emptiness and compassion. We also talked about this energy as being the display of the mind. So mind's energy expresses itself or displays itself as multiplicity, and you can see that everywhere. And this multiplicity is emptiness displayed as form. And so the form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And you can't ever quite nail it down, because all form is empty of inherent existence, but based on that very nature, it can display itself in any form. And that's the play, that's the display, the creativity of the universe. And that's also bliss when we recognize it. Or as Nagarjuna says, which we also chant at the end of the Heart Sutra, not different, not the same. So this is how we can start to lessen the conceptual hold that we have on subject and object. Because the energy of subject and object that we are perceiving right now as being radically opposed to each other is not different and not the same. And Longchenpa says if you look at the nature of the mind, you can't find the self. You can't even find the mind. But what you can become is aware of every single way that that is displaying itself. So that lack of inherent self, because of the lack, can display. The fact that my hand, for example, does not have an inherent fixed position means I can move and make this gesture as I talk. So Sogyal Rinpoche says the Sanskrit word dharmata, or chudni in Tibetan, means the intrinsic nature of everything, the essence of things as they are. And he says that dharmata is the naked, unconditioned truth, the nature of reality, the true nature of phenomenal existence. And Longchenpa describes that recognizing the nature of mind or the nature of dharmata, recognizing this wisdom, and here's the quote, is the birth of a profound and calm understanding. It's recognizing spontaneous presence of a supreme and all-encompassing love that can move in thought from one person to all beings to the very limits of the 10 directions. And why can it move? Because it's utter openness. Its total lack of specificity means that it can arise as anything. So this is the great freedom that Longchenpa is really pointing out to us. It's this bliss that he's pointing out to us. So ultimately, the 4 qualities of love, compassion, joyfulness, and equanimity do not need to be cultivated on an ultimate level, because ultimately everything that arises, including our body, our speech, and our mind, are the spontaneous display of love, compassion, and joy. But until we recognize this fully, we need to remind ourselves again and again by looking and looking and looking at the nature of our mind until we really abide firmly in this non-dual wisdom. So Longchenpa says, compassion does not arise, it does not cease, and is selfless. Therefore, being for others is always present. It need not come about. So this is our natural state. We just need to recognize it and look at it. So the direct realization of our own natural state, our own bodhicitta, spontaneously entails compassion. Because such a direct awareness naturally includes compassion for those who are not connected with their own realization of their own nature of mind as bliss. So if you have this non-dual awareness as a Buddha, and you see others suffering, of course, your wisdom naturally contains the compassion that you have for them. So it's not even something that they have to cultivate, because for them, that's who they are. And they see everyone else's Buddha nature, and they are also extremely sad that that all other people don't recognize their own Buddha nature. So that's why they teach. That's why they return as bodhisattvas. That's why they perform any kind of activity of body, speech, and mind to help other people awaken to this. So this is the great good news. And I just wanted to remind us again today, because sometimes I forget about it as well. I get really bogged down by slogging through sometimes my preliminary practices. And then I have to remind myself, I know this already. I inherently am just displaying my own innate Buddha nature when I practice this. What does it matter if I have to do 100 more thousand prostrations? It doesn't matter. This is the natural expression, the way that I can remind myself of this. I can be really happy that I can cultivate this. So we keep on cultivating it on the level of aspiring to remember our Buddha nature and to remember that our body, speech, and mind are all activities of our Buddha nature. And we keep on doing this until it's spontaneously present for us, until we don't need to remind ourselves anymore. So this will be the last quote from Longchenpa, and then we'll actually practice, because the best way for us to experience this is by actually meditating. And this is from Reverberation of Sound. And this really is an amazing thing. He says, all sentient beings of the three realms who have not transcended their body, speech, or mind need not search elsewhere for the three kayas, for the three bodies of Buddhahood. Even if they do, there is no place to discover them. Not emergent from the past, nor emerging in the present, through observation, through direct looking, direct seeing. This is seen right now. How astonishing. The play of this great marvel involves no distinctions between the Buddhas or sentient beings. Just as there are clouds in the sky, this is self-emergent, self-perfected inner peace. So by the distinction of the direct realization of Dharmata, there exists no difference between sharp versus dull faculties. So it is not the case that any sentient being abides as anything other than awakened. By virtue of the mind pervading all embodied beings, there are no living beings who are not Buddhas. So the fact that you have a mind means that you are a Buddha, because your inherent nature of your mind is the Buddha nature. And all it is that we just keep on needing to look at it, look at it, look at it, look at it. And out of that, we have the potential to awaken to it and really awaken to the fact that we already have known for a very, very, very infinitely long time compassion, love, and joy, and all of its various expressions. So it's just an incredibly beautiful teaching when you bring both of those together, because then you can start practicing with the Mahayana view of developing compassion, developing loving kindness, developing joy. But you can practice it from the view of the Vajrayanas, where you know what the result is. You know the result is your Buddha nature. So you take the result as the path. You take the result as what guides you in your practice. And as you do that, the goal becomes the path. The result becomes the path. And each time you forget that, you just need to remind yourself again and remember, yes, I know that, I know that, I know that. So again, that is what I think is a really important thing to remember, because if we focus only on suffering, we will only see also beings who are suffering, which is really important to do. But as we're helping beings who are suffering, it's really important to remember that those beings are displaying suffering. But ultimately, That's not who they are. Ultimately, they are Buddhas. And as soon as we do that, then our view of human beings changes radically, because we are actually seeing them from the position of the result. If I truly saw all of you as Buddhas, how would that change how I talk with you? How would that change how I interact with you? How would that change everything about my actions? That's a profound shift. And so when we're practicing, even though we might not be there yet, and Khenpo does remind us, we're not there yet, we need to at least know that that is the potential for us and cultivate that all the time. Because cultivating that primordial purity, that view, is a very, very profound thing. Everyone you meet, if you really saw them as the Buddha, if you really saw them as the Buddha of compassion or as Tara coming towards you, how would that change your view of them? How would that change your actions of body, speech, and mind? And so that's just the question that I leave open for all of us. And now I'd like to ask us to practice together, because in the meditation that Khenpo taught us on Chenresig, this is actually what we are doing. We're using the meditation to cultivate this view of primordial purity, this view of all form as Buddhas, of all speech as mantra, and all thoughts as wisdom, arising as wisdom. And so that's what we're going to do when we actually practice this. So I know that there's some people here who have not practiced some of the stages where we do some generation with the yidams. The good news is that this text, as we read it, tells you exactly what to do. And when you start this, you are not expected to be able to see everything immediately. It's like playing an instrument. The first time you sit down to play an instrument, you need to learn and break it down into notes. And then after you have some notes, then you can start to understand chords, or maybe start to understand scales. And then soon those scales become the arpeggios, and then soon they become entire songs, and then they become symphonies, and then maybe they arise as some tremendous thing that's beyond sound. That is how these practices build. But it doesn't matter. When you're visualizing and when you're reciting the mantra, what you can do is whatever is arising most strongly for you, just keep that as the clarity of your focus. Keep that as your point that you can connect to. And know that that single pointedness will help your mind develop concentration. And as your mind develops concentration, your actual abilities to visualize, your actual ability to practice all of this more fully will deepen naturally over time. So if at any point you start to feel frustrated, feel that, and then just let it go and return to whatever part of the visualization in the mantra you can connect with. So just relax, and we'll practice this together. And as I said, we'll read it out loud together, because the text actually tells you the instructions for this visualization. So first of all, you can take a look, and we can see a picture of Four-Arm Chenresig, or Four-Arm Avalokiteshvara. He is the Buddha of compassion. He is white in color, because he is expressing the purity of the nature of his mind through the color white. He has 4 arms, which symbolize the 4 immeasurables of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. His 2 arms in the center are holding the wish-fulfilling jewel. The wish-fulfilling jewel symbolizes bodhicitta, and the union of these 2 arms together symbolizes that he recognizes the union of relative bodhicitta, which we talked about as expressed as compassion, with the nature of the mind, which is the ultimate bodhicitta. So that's why he has these 2 hands holding the wish-fulfilling jewel of bodhicitta. Then in his left hand, he holds a lotus, which is also another symbol for purity, and also for his compassion for all beings. And in the right hand, he holds a crystal mala, which symbolizes his skillful means And again, the skillful methods that he has in bringing all beings to liberation. So skillful methods are his incredible capacities as a Buddha of compassion to bring all beings to enlightenment, to help them realize the nature of mind. So that's why he has 4 arms. He also has the rest of the Sambhogakaya ornaments, which are basically means that he is in his Sambhogakaya form, which is the form that Buddhas can take when they are teaching. And also it's the form that they take when they are radiating light rays, which is one of his functions that we're going to do, is that he's going to radiate light rays of rainbow colors, which is all light rays of the 5 rainbow energies of all of the purified form of the elements. And that is going to be radiating his bodhicitta. And the rest of the explanation of his form, you will see that's actually given in the text. So as we always do when we start out meditating, the first thing we're going to do is recite the prayer of refuge and bodhicitta 3 times. And then after that, we'll move on to the prayer of the 4 boundless qualities. So let's do that together. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until enlightenment is achieved. May the merit of my generosity and other virtuous acts lead to Buddhahood for the welfare of all beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until enlightenment is achieved. May the merit of my generosity and other virtuous acts lead to Buddhahood for the welfare of all beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until enlightenment is achieved. May the merit of my generosity and other virtuous acts lead to Buddhahood for the welfare of all beings. Prayer of the 4 boundless qualities 3 times. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be apart from the sublime bliss that is free from suffering. May they remain in a state of equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be apart from the sublime bliss that is free from suffering. May they remain in a state of equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be apart from the sublime bliss that is free from suffering, and may they remain in a state of equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. So then, now we're going to do the visualization of Four-Arm Avalokiteshvara. On the right side is the seed syllable Shri, and just so you know, a seed syllable is just like what we would represents the Dharmakaya, or the enlightened mind of the Buddhas. So out of the seed syllable, out of the Dharmakaya, which symbolizes the emptiness that we were talking about before, the compassion of the Buddhas arise as their seed syllable. So this is again, right away, the union of the relative and the ultimate bodhicitta that we're talking about. If you can't visualize the seed syllable, Shri, don't worry about it. Just know that it's there. And that as soon as you say the word Shri in the text, immediately know that out of that arises Four-Armed Avalokiteshvara. If you can't visualize that completely, focus on one part of him, maybe the bodhicitta jewel, the wish-fulfilling jewel that he's holding at his heart. And remember that that also symbolizes the union of the relative and the ultimate bodhicitta. So now we'll recite the actual visualization, and this tells you exactly how to visualize. On the crown of my head and those of others, sentient beings pervading space, on a white lotus and moon, from Shri appears noble and supreme Avalokita. He is brilliant white and radiates the 5 lights. Handsome and smiling, he looks on with eyes of compassion. He has 4 hands. The first are joined in Anjali. The lower 2 hold a crystal mala and a white lotus. Adorned with ornaments of silks and jewels, he wears an upper garment of deerskin. Amitabha crowns his head. His 2 feet are in Vajra posture. His back rests against the stainless moon. He is the embodiment of all objects and refuge. So take a moment just to visualize Avalokiteshvara in this form above your head. Remember that his body is not a solid body. It is empty of inherent existence. It is like rainbow light, yet it appears. It can manifest as the Buddha of compassion. Remember that this is reminding you also that you, your nature of mind, is empty of inherent existence, yet it can manifest and does manifest as compassion, loving kindness, and joy. So remind yourself that you are no different than Avalokiteshvara, except for he recognizes his Buddha nature and knows himself to be that. So this teaching of using the Idam deity is reminding you of this. This is how you practice this until you know this. So now we're going to do the supplication and mantra recitation. We'll say the 4 lines that begin with Lord 3 times. Lord, white in color, unstained by faults, a perfect Buddha adorning your head. You look upon being with eyes of compassion. Avalokita, we prostrate to you. Lord, white in color, unstained by faults, a perfect Buddha adorning your head. You look upon beings with eyes of compassion. Avalokita, we prostrate to you. Lord, white in color, unstained by faults, a perfect Buddha adorning your head. You look upon beings with eyes of compassion. Avalokita, we prostrate to you. Now, as a result of supplicating and prostrating to him with body, speech, and mind three times, he now responds to us with the next stanza. So read together, and this is his response to our supplication. Due to our supplicating one-pointedly in that way, light rays stream forth from the body of the Noble One, and purify impure karmic appearances and mistaken consciousness. The outer world becomes the pure land of Sukhavati. The body, speech, and mind of the inhabitants within become the body, speech, and mind of Avalokita. Appearances, sounds, and awareness are inseparable from emptiness. With that, the outer world becomes the Pure Land, or the mandala of Sukhavati. Sukhavati is the Sanskrit term for Dechen, which is Dewa Khenpo, which is the great Pure Land of bliss, which is the bliss of the Buddha Amitabha, who is the Lord of the Padma, or the lotus family of compassion, who sits on top of Avalokiteshvara's head. And that at that time, when he's sending out these rays of rainbow light, you, I, and everyone else, we all turn into Avalokiteshvara. So very much like we practice Vajrasattva, where we first purify and visualize Vajrasattva above our head, after the purification, all of us arise at this point as the Buddha of compassion, as Avalokiteshvara, and everything around us is a Pure Land, and everything, all phenomena that are arising, whether in form, sound as a mantra, or any thoughts, it's all arising as the wisdom of the union of emptiness and compassion, which is bliss. Appearances, sounds, and awareness are inseparable for emptiness. So now we'll do the mantra recitation. I have a mala, so we'll do one round of Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum is the way the Tibetans pronounce it. Om Mani Padme Hum is more of the Sanskrit. Om is the salutation to the body, speech, and mind of all the Buddhas. It's how we begin most mantras. Mani means jewel in Sanskrit. Padme means lotus. And Hum or Hung is the mind of the Buddhas, which is the union of emptiness and compassion. Essentially, when we say this mantra, it's no different than saying Hail to the Buddha of the Jewel Lotus, which is saying Hail to Avalokiteshvara, or calling him to us to bless us. His mantra is also the essence of the union of emptiness and compassion, non-dual, relative bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. So when we're saying Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, you visualize yourself as Avalokiteshvara emanating these light rays of five-colored light, which bless and purify and function as a wish-fulfilling jewel for the needs of all suffering sentient beings. And you're emanating this out as you recite the mantra. If you can't visualize all of that, just recite the mantra and listen to the sound and know that the empty sound is also empty of inherent existence, yet is the energy of compassion radiating out via sound. So you can visualize light rays flowing out, you visualize the sound flowing out, you visualize the body of Avalokiteshvara. Do whatever you can do, but most of all, just feel that energy of compassion radiating out of your heart center. Okay, so we'll do one mala of it. Recite it softly to yourself. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. So you can hear the sound. So we'll do that right now. Om Mani Padme Hum. That is a very short mantra recitation practice. Now we'll offer the seven-limb prayer. I bow down in body, speech, and mind. I present offerings both actually arranged and mentally created. I purify all deluded actions. I rejoice in all pure activities. I request you to remain until total enlightenment. I request your wise and compassionate guidance. I dedicate my merit for the benefit of others. At this point, you can recall to mind that you just offered the seven-limb prayer to the Buddha of Compassion, Avalokiteshvara, who is inseparable from your kindness of your root teacher. And with the seven-limb prayer, you can always practice a quick series of Guru Yoga. So if you're doing this at home, at this point you could imagine Avalokiteshvara and merging into the root teacher, and your root teacher merging into your heart center. And at that point you would practice the dissolution of the entire mandala, of the entire visualization. And that's what we're going to do right now. The session conclusion is the dissolution. After that, we're going to rest for 5 minutes in objectless meditation. So after we have created the object of our meditation in the form of meditating on the Buddha of Compassion, we have performed his compassionate activities in the form of light rays and doing mantra recitation. At this point, we're going to take all of that and dissolve that back into the awareness that we have of the union of emptiness, which is the union of emptiness and compassion. So the relative part of the bodhicitta is really practicing with the deity and with the mantra. Now we're going to focus more concretely and more with awareness on the emptiness side, but really they're in union. The session conclusion, normally at home you would just dissolve and you would rest. You would not read the italics out loud, but because it's part of the teaching today, we're going to read the italics out loud of the session conclusion so that you can learn about the dissolution. Finally, the entire phenomenal world, now transformed into kayas and pure realms by the light from the Guru's body on the crown of your head, melts into light and dissolves into Guru Avalokita, who in turn melts into light and dissolves into you, after which you too melt into light. Rest evenly for as long as possible in the luminous emptiness, free of any conception about the three spheres that clings to self and other, the deity and mantra. Let go of all references towards fabricated attributes, such as existence and non-existence. It is and it is not, an emptiness or non-emptiness, free of viewer and viewed, not differentiating appearance, sound, and awareness from emptiness. Rest for as long as possible in the mind of the Noble One, the natural face of the great and all-pervading Dharma Dhatu. So we're going to rest just for a few minutes, and then we'll do the rest of the session conclusion and dedicate the merit. Okay, and when you arise from that, which means when your thoughts return, then immediately what you want to do is start reciting the next line on the next page. When you arise from this, recite. And this is exactly when you're cultivating the view of primordial purity, where all sounds that arise are mantra, all forms are deity, and all thoughts are wisdom that recognizes the union of emptiness and compassion. So after the dissolution, when you arise again yourself as form, as speech, and as body, then what you immediately want to remind yourself is of the concept of seeing everyone as Buddhas, of hearing all sounds as mantra and all thoughts as wisdom. So again, you're trying to merge your relative and your ultimate views into your daily life. So this is how you would bring this into your daily life. So let's recite the line that starts the physical appearance. The physical appearance of myself and others is the body of the Noble One. Sounds are the melody of the 6 syllables. Thoughts are the expanse of great wisdom. And now we're going to dedicate the merit. By this merit, may we quickly accomplish Avalokiteshvara and establish all beings without exception in that state. Closing prayers. Aspiration prayer by Jumapam. May I attain in each and every life the sublime virtues of existence and peace. May I pursue the flawless mindset of altruism, working for the welfare of others on a vast scale. Through this very merit of mine, may every single sentient being eliminate all forms of negativity and practice virtue forevermore. May Supreme Precious Bodhicitta take birth where it has not arisen. Where it has arisen, may it never wane, but continue to grow forevermore. May Supreme Precious Bodhicitta take birth where it has not arisen. Where it has arisen, may it never wane, but continue to grow forevermore. May Supreme Precious Bodhicitta take birth where it has not arisen. Where it has arisen, may it never wane, but continue to grow forevermore. Prayer of the 6 continuous aspirations. May I in all my lives, no matter where I am born, obtain the 7 qualities of the upper realms of existence. May I meet the Dharma immediately after taking birth and have the freedom to practice perfectly. May I please the sublime gurus and day and night dedicate myself to the Dharma. By realizing the Dharma and practicing its innermost essence, may I cross the ocean of conditioned existence in this very life. May I teach the sublime Dharma perfectly and never become weary and tired of benefiting others in samsara. By my own impartial and all-encompassing activities to benefit others, may all attain enlightenment together. So that is a really wonderful practice if you can take more time at home to do it. And all of those parts with the mantra recitation, with the visualization, with the resting in objectless meditation of the nature of mind, you could extend that out and actually just really, really enjoy sending out the rays of light of compassion. You could also visualize a person that you know is suffering deeply in their life from illness, and you could visualize themselves in front of you as you're performing that practice. So if you practice white Tara, for example, and you could also practice Avalokiteshvara, the nature of compassion, there's no difference between white Tara and, for example, the Buddha Chenrezig. So take time at home. I'm sorry that we had to go through it quickly here today, but I hope that you still found benefit in it and know that you can develop the visualizations as extensively as you can over time, but that you can also keep it simple like this. And it's a profound practice. It's working with the natural state of your mind and with your ability to be that source of compassion, be that joy, be that loving kindness, and be that in a way that's, equanimity, that's in a non-biased, non-partial way for all beings. So thank you so much for coming today. And we have a few minutes, so are there any questions or comments that anyone has?
I was just going to comment when we were at Mahamudra, one of the questions I had was, or I don't know if it's really a question, but just the idea of not fabricating,
Mm-hmm.
not letting go, but not fabricating. That's hard, I think, for people to let go of,
Mm-hmm.
because they want to be in that space, and it's easy to try to make it happen. It doesn't work like that.
I think also in some ways, though, that the fabrication, for example, that we do when we visualize an object of refuge or an object like the Buddha of compassion, what I love about Longchenpa's teachings is he says, yes, that's a fabrication, but remember, it's also the reflection of the nature of your mind. It's the natural quality of your mind, that everything that you're encountering is a reflection of your perceptions, is a reflection of your view of the world. So in some ways, it is a fabrication, but in some ways, it's also the way that we are. That's the way our minds work. And so that's, I don't know how to describe it. It's like there's a time in order to be able to let go, you have to have an object to let go of, right? So that is one of the things that we're doing is when we're working with the Yidam deity, is that we're fabricating an object that is reflecting back to us like a mirror image, the nature of our own mind. And that what we do is when we do the dissolution process, we just boom, let that go, and then we rest in that openness. But I think until we are in that openness, resting and abiding all the time, we need the fabrication, because that's how we become aware of things, is by having them arise in our awareness.
Well, I meant more like fabricating ultimate reality. Like where people want to learn these things, and so they have this goal set instead of just kind of letting things happen as they're supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm. But it's also, part of this is also the training that we do, because there's another deeper level of teachings on the generation and completion stages, which actually have to do with the fact that if we don't recognize in this lifetime the nature of our mind and be able to merge with the Dharmakaya at all times, then we will think that there is a self that dies. And as that, we will take our karmic whole bag of tricks with us, and that the physical body will die, and then we'll have this experience of the between arising of the bardo. And at that point, these teachings of the generation and completion stage, which are in some ways a fabrication, if we can recognize that this is the nature of the mind, then our experience of the bardo is much different. So there's another level of teachings, which I'm not really qualified to give, but there's a whole other level where these generation completion stages, every stage of it, from the seed syllable, has to do with purifying the birth, purifying the dream and the sleep state and all that kind of stuff. And so in some ways, this different stages is not really a fabrication too. But until we can actually say, yeah, we're with the Dharmakaya all the time, until we have like fears of death, fears of all these things, then these practices can be, really helpful to us. So I wish I could give those teachings. Yeah.
I consider myself a rather simple sort, and one of the things that I learned a long time, or heard a long time ago, was that the suggestion was to pretend all of these things, because as you pretend is just another word for a pretendency, which is what you were saying to begin with. Is that if you practice it long enough, it sort of can become real. So it isn't called pretense; it's called pretend. Like fabrication to me has a feeling of like not telling the truth, maybe, which is a sort of very limiting negative view of it. But if you say, well, I'm pretending this because this is a pretendency that I wish to grow.
I think so. And another concept that brings up is the idea of rehearsal.
Yeah.
Acting as if, we
Act-
call it acting as if in therapy.
Mhm.
Act as if you're brave enough to go to the party.
Or
Yeah, fake it till you
Yeah,
make it.
exactly, or act as if, or as if you are a Buddha, so that you have more of a, like you said, a pre-tendency developed or a habit developed to express yourself in that way.
And if a person doesn't feel that they can visualize things, if they just pretend they're visualizing it, that's really a good entry.
I also think that it's really important just to, like for example, like when I see you, Lee, you're there, you're present for me. And when I'm talking to you right now, I don't keep on thinking to myself, visualize Lee, visualize Lee, visualize Lee, visualize Lee. I mean, I see you, you rise in my awareness, and then you're there, and then I know you're there. And so I can talk with you right now. In some ways, when we visualize a Yidam deity, like Avalokiteshvara is the Buddha of compassion, we can do the same thing. We can give rise to a very strong visualization and then know that essence of compassion, the union of the wisdom, union of compassion, that energy is there. And so just like you said, you can maybe don't keep on visualizing it, but you know that energy is there. You know that presence is there. I hope I'm a simple person as well. One of the things, though, that I really like about Buddhism, though, is that it really has a profound path if you really want to investigate the nature of reality, down to rays of light, vibrations of sound, down to, where you keep on trying to find, what they call the partless particle, and eventually go down to, emptiness, and then realize that it's, as you say, all around us all the time. Buddhism has paths that we can keep things as simple and practice loving kindness, compassion, and joy, and equanimity, or we can really dive into how our mind arises, the nature of our mind, all the different levels of consciousness, the elements of our outer body, the elements of the subtle inner body, all those things. And so one of the things that I really enjoy is encountering that. We have such a rich path in Buddhism, and we're not making anything up. We're not fabricating anything up. All we're doing is bringing into awareness a deeper and stronger understanding of the nature of reality. And I certainly, as a teacher, don't have enough profound insight and profound meditative experience to be able to guide you through those things. But I have a profound appreciation that texts still exist from Longchenpa who does, and that there are meditation masters in an unbroken lineage, including our own teacher who has studied for 30 years, to have that kind of ability to share that level of teachings. So even though I don't have it, I have great joy in being part of this community which makes some of these teachings available on different levels. So I'm really happy about that, and I'm also, really grateful to all of you, because you allow me to have the motivation to remember these teachings from 2008 and try to resurrect them out of my brain and say, what did Khenpo teach us? So hopefully once he gets back, we can ask him for more teachings on this, because this is a beautiful practice. And if you enjoy it, please, ask him to teach it again, because certainly we could all practice this together, many times. So, are there any more comments or questions? If not, thank you so much for coming, and have a wonderful day.